Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her back against the cold metal wall of the detention cell, her medical bag clutched tightly in her hands. The alien ship hummed around her with an otherworldly frequency that made her teeth ache. 3 days ago, she had been treating wounded civilians on the human colony of New Geneva when the Korthak raiders descended from the stars like metallic vultures. The Korthak were a warrior species that had terrorized the Outer Rim colonies for decades. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, with chitinous exoskeletons and mandibles that could crush steel, they lived for conquest and combat. Their reputation for cruelty was matched only by their arrogance. They considered humans to be nothing more than soft, weak creatures, suitable only for slavery or entertainment. Sarah watched through the energy barrier that sealed her cell as the alien guards moved past. Their language sounded like grinding metal mixed with clicking insects. She had learned enough Korthak during her medical training to understand fragments of their conversation. They were discussing something called the blood trials and how the humans would provide amusing sport. The ship shuddered slightly as it dropped out of hyperspace. Through the small porthole in her cell, Sarah could see a massive space station orbiting a dead planet. The structure was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, with countless spires and docking bays. Ships of various alien designs moved around it like bees around a hive. A new guard approached her cell, this one wearing more elaborate armor that marked him as an officer. His 4 eyes studied her with predatory interest. When he spoke, his words came through a translation device attached to his throat. Human female, you are different from the others. Your scent carries the mark of one who has seen much death. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I'm a doctor. I save lives, not take them. The Korthak officer made a sound that might have been laughter. You will learn differently soon enough. The arena masters have special plans for your species. But first, we have prepared a test for you. The energy barrier flickered and died. 4 guards entered the cell, their weapons trained on her. Sarah didn't resist as they bound her hands with energy shackles and marched her through the ship's corridors. The walls were decorated with trophies from countless conquered worlds, weapons, artifacts, and preserved remains of defeated enemies. They emerged onto a massive observation deck where dozens of Korthak were gathered. The view beyond showed the space station in all its terrible glory. Sarah could see arena structures, prison complexes, and what looked like gladiatorial coliseums scattered across its surface. The officer who had visited her cell stepped forward, addressing the crowd in their native tongue before switching to the translation device for her benefit. This human claims to be a healer. Her people are weak, but some show interesting potential when properly motivated. We will test this one's true nature by placing her in an environment where her healing instincts will be challenged. A massive holographic display activated, showing the interior of what appeared to be a holding pen. The space was roughly 50 feet square, with walls of reinforced energy barriers. But it was the occupant that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The creature was unlike anything she had ever seen. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, covered in midnight black fur that seemed to absorb light. Its body was powerfully built, somewhere between a wolf and a bear, with arms that ended in claws the size of kitchen knives. But it was the intelligence in its yellow eyes that struck her most. This wasn't just a beast. It was a sentient being. This is a Fenris Prime, the officer continued with obvious relish. One of the last of their kind. We found it defending a mining colony 3 systems away. It killed 47 of my warriors before we managed to capture it. For 2 weeks. It has refused all food and attacked anyone who enters its cage. The creature in the display was clearly suffering. Sarah's medical training kicked in automatically as she assessed its condition. Malnutrition was evident in the way its fur had lost its luster. There were untreated wounds across its body, some showing signs of infection. Dehydration was apparent in its sunken eyes and the way it moved with careful, conserved energy. "The arena masters grow impatient," the officer said. "If the beast dies before it can provide sport, they will be displeased. So we present you with a choice, human doctor. Enter its cage and use your healing skills to restore it to fighting condition, and we will ensure your fellow colonists are treated well. Refuse, and we will space them all while you watch." Sarah's jaw clenched. She thought of the families from New Geneva, the children, the elderly, the wounded she had been treating when the raid began. Many of them were barely more than civilians who had never hurt anyone. "What guarantee do I have that you'll keep your word?" "None. But you have my guarantee that if you refuse, they will all die within the hour." The crowd of Korthak chittered with anticipation. Sarah realized this was as much entertainment for them as it was a practical matter. They expected her to be torn apart by the creature, providing a brief spectacle before they found another way to motivate their captive. "I'll need my medical supplies." Of course. We wouldn't want to make it too easy. 20 minutes later, Sarah stood before the entrance to the holding pen. Her medical bag had been returned to her, though she suspected the Korthak had removed anything they considered potentially dangerous. The energy barrier that sealed the entrance flickered ominously. Through the transparent barrier, she could see the Fenris Prime. It had noticed the activity and now crouched in the far corner, yellow eyes fixed on the entrance. Its lips were pulled back in a silent snarl, revealing teeth the size of railroad spikes. The Korthak officer stood beside her, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "The barrier will seal behind you. You have until tomorrow to make the creature healthy enough to fight. If you succeed, your people live another day. If you fail—" He gestured toward the arena structures visible through the observation windows. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward. The energy barrier dissolved, allowing her to enter the cage, then immediately reformed behind her. The sudden silence was deafening after the constant chatter of the Korthak crowd. The Fenris Prime watched her every movement as she slowly approached. Its breathing was labored, and she could see the infection spreading from several deep wounds on its flanks. Dark blood had dried around its muzzle, and its water container sat empty in the corner. "Hello," she said softly, keeping her voice calm and non-threatening. "I know you can understand me. I'm a doctor. I'm here to help." The creature's ears flicked forward slightly, but its posture remained defensive. Sarah slowly reached into her medical bag and withdrew a portable scanner. The device hummed quietly as it analyzed the creature's vital signs from a distance. The readings were worse than she had feared. Severe dehydration, multiple infections, internal bleeding from what looked like projectile wounds, and signs of prolonged starvation. Without immediate treatment, the creature would be dead within days. "I know you don't trust me," Sarah continued, settling into a cross-legged position about 10 feet away. "I wouldn't trust me either if I were you. But right now, I'm the only chance you have." The Fenris Prime's head tilted slightly, studying her with those unsettling yellow eyes. When it finally spoke, its voice was a deep rumble that seemed to come from the depths of its chest. "Human, why do you come here? Do you seek to mock me before I die?" Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The creature's English was accented but perfectly clear. "No mockery, just medicine. You're dying, and I can help you live." "Live to entertain these parasites in their blood games? I would rather die with what dignity remains to me." Sarah considered her words carefully. "Maybe there's another option. Maybe we can find a way to live and keep our dignity too." The creature was silent for a long moment. Then it made a sound that might have been bitter laughter. "You speak of hope, little healer. Hope died when my pack fell defending cubs who couldn't even walk yet. I'm sorry for your loss, but giving up won't bring them back." The Fenris Prime studied her for several more minutes, as if weighing her words against some internal scale. Finally, it shifted slightly, allowing her to see the full extent of its wounds. If you truly wish to help, then help. But know that I will not forget who put these chains upon me." Sarah slowly rose and approached, her hands visible and empty except for her scanner. "What's your name?" "Mine is Sarah. I am called Grimjaw among my people. I was a pack leader before." His voice trailed off, heavy with loss. "Grimjaw, that's a strong name." Sarah knelt beside him, close enough now to smell the infection in his wounds. "This is going to hurt, but I need to clean these injuries before they spread." As she began her examination, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing a line from which there would be no return. The Korthak expected her to heal this creature so they could use him for sport. But looking into Grimjaw's intelligent eyes, she began to form a different plan altogether. The first step was keeping them both alive. Everything else would have to wait. Outside the energy barrier, the Korthak watched and chittered among themselves, placing bets on how long the small human would survive. None of them suspected that they had just made the gravest error in their species' history. They had given a human doctor a patient to protect and time to work. Sarah worked through the night, her hands steady despite the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her. Grimjaw had finally allowed her to tend his wounds properly after she had proven her medical skills by successfully treating a deep infection in his shoulder. The improvement in his condition was dramatic enough that he began to trust her ministrations. "The small cut behind your left ear," Sarah said as she applied a healing gel to another wound. "That's not from the battle where they captured you." "It's too precise, too clean." Grimjaw's ears flattened against his skull. "You observe well, healer. It was made by their neural probe. They wanted to understand how my people's minds work. The Korthak believe that fear is the only true motivation, but they discovered something unexpected in my memories." "What did they find?" "That my pack chose to stand and fight not because we feared death, but because we loved life. The cubs we died protecting were not even our own blood. We fought because it was right, not because we were compelled." Sarah paused in her work. "That concept bothers them, doesn't it?" "Greatly. The Korthak social structure is built on dominance and submission. The idea that beings would sacrifice themselves for others without hope of reward or fear of punishment threatens their entire worldview." As the hours passed, Sarah learned more about her unlikely patient. Grimjaw's people, the Fenris, were a proud warrior race, but not in the way the Korthak understood warfare. They fought to protect, not to conquer. Their entire civilization was built around pack bonds and mutual protection. "Your people," Grimjaw said as Sarah checked his hydration levels. "The Korthak speak of humans as weak, but you show no fear. Why?" Sarah smiled grimly. "Fear is a luxury I can't afford right now. I have patients to care for. Both you and the colonists they're holding. Fear would just get in the way. You speak of duty as my people do. Perhaps humans and Fenris are not so different." By dawn, Grimjaw's condition had stabilized dramatically. The infections were clearing, his wounds were healing, and proper nutrition and hydration had restored much of his strength. But more importantly, Sarah had gained his trust and learned valuable information about their captors. The Korthak had been testing various captured species in their arena for months, trying to find the perfect combination of opponents for their upcoming Grand Hunt, a galaxy-wide broadcast event that would demonstrate their dominance to potential enemies. The survivors would be sold as gladiatorial slaves to the highest bidders. "The arena matches begin in 3 days, Grimjaw explained as Sarah checked his reflexes. "They plan to pit me against a series of opponents, building excitement for the main event. But there is something else, healer. I have heard whispers among the guards." "What kind of whispers?" "They speak of a special exhibition match, a demonstration of human fragility. They plan to put your people in the arena with minimal weapons against creatures designed to hunt them. Sarah's blood ran cold. When? Tomorrow. They want to test the entertainment value before the main broadcasts begin. The energy barrier flickered, and the familiar figure of the Korthak officer appeared. His 4 eyes surveyed the scene with obvious surprise. Grimjaw was standing now, his posture strong and alert. The evidence of Sarah's medical work was undeniable. Impressive human. The beast appears almost healthy. The arena masters will be pleased. He activated his translation device. You have earned your people another day of life, but do not become comfortable. Tomorrow brings new challenges. After the officer left, Sarah and Grimjaw continued their quiet conversation. She had been observing the guard rotations, the energy barrier controls, and the layout of the holding area. Her medical scanner had also been analyzing the ship's internal atmosphere and structure. Grimjaw, what do you know about Korthak physiology? They are insectoid in nature with exoskeletons that provide natural armor. But they have weaknesses. The joints of their limbs are vulnerable, and their breathing apparatus can be disrupted if their mandibles are damaged. What about their technology? The energy barriers, the weapons? Grimjaw's eyes gleamed with understanding. You are planning something. Maybe. Tell me about their backup power systems. For the next several hours, Sarah and Grimjaw shared knowledge like battlefield commanders preparing for war. She explained human physiology and medical techniques, while he taught her about alien biology and the technical aspects of their prison ship. The ship operated on a centralized power grid with emergency backup systems. The holding cells were designed to contain beings through energy barriers rather than physical walls, which made them vulnerable to power fluctuations. Most importantly, the Korthak had a cultural blind spot when it came to cooperation between different species. They cannot comprehend true alliance, Grimjaw explained. In their society, temporary partnerships exist only until one party can betray the other for advantage. They would never expect a human and a Fenris to work together as equals. That evening, guards brought their daily rations. For Sarah, it was a gray protein paste that barely qualified as food. For Grimjaw, they provided chunks of raw meat from unknown alien animals. Both meals were calculated to provide just enough nutrition to survive, nothing more. But Sarah had been preparing for this moment. Hidden in her medical supplies was a small emergency ration kit, high-energy bars designed for field medics working in crisis conditions. She had been saving them, eating only the prison rations to build up a reserve. We need to build up our strength, she told Grimjaw as she shared one of the energy bars with him. Tomorrow, they're going to test my people in the arena. I won't let that happen. What do you propose, healer? I propose we remind the Korthak why humans and Fenris survived long enough to make it to the stars in the first place. Sarah outlined her plan. It was dangerous, probably suicidal, but it was their only chance. The Korthak had made several crucial mistakes in their arrogance. They had underestimated human intelligence and medical training. They had failed to properly search her medical equipment. Most importantly, they had assumed that healing someone meant she would be willing to send them to their death in the arena. The power coupling for this section is located 3 levels down, Grimjaw said, studying the layout they had sketched on the floor with a piece of metal Sarah had found. But the access tunnel is too small for me. A human might be able to fit, but barely. That's my job, then. How long would it take you to reach the main holding area where they're keeping the colonists? If I could move freely? Perhaps 10 minutes, but the corridors will be filled with guards once the alarms begin. Sarah smiled grimly. Leave that to me. I've been studying their patrol patterns, and I have a few medical tricks that might help. She opened her bag and showed him several items that the Korthak had overlooked. A high-intensity surgical light that could temporarily blind someone. Several aerosol canisters of antiseptic that became toxic gas when mixed. And most importantly, a small cutting laser designed for precise surgical work. It's not much of a weapon, she admitted, holding up the laser, but it's enough to cut through the power couplings if I can reach them. And if you're caught, then I'll be dead, and you'll have to find another way to save my people. Grimjaw was quiet for a long moment. Then he placed one massive clawed hand gently on her shoulder. Healer Sarah, I have seen many warriors in my time. Most fought for glory, for treasure, or for survival, but you fight for something else entirely. What's that? For the belief that some things are worth dying for. That is the rarest kind of courage in the galaxy. As night fell over the prison ship, Sarah and Grimjaw made their final preparations. Tomorrow would bring either freedom or death, but tonight they had something the Korthak couldn't understand. Two different species united by a common purpose. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. The aliens had imprisoned her with their deadliest captive, expecting one to neutralize the other. Instead, they had created an alliance that would shake the foundations of their belief system. Outside their cell, the ship continued its routine operations. Guards changed shifts, prisoners were processed, and the arena crew prepared for tomorrow's entertainment. None of them suspected that in one small holding cell, a human doctor and a Fenris warrior were about to remind the galaxy why some species were never meant to be caged. The escape began at 0347 ship time, during the quiet hours when the guard rotation was at its thinnest. Sarah had spent days memorizing the patrol schedules, noting that there was a 15-minute window when only automated systems monitored their section. Grimjaw created the first distraction by deliberately triggering a minor medical emergency. Using techniques Sarah had taught him, he induced symptoms that would register on the automated monitoring systems as concerning but not immediately life-threatening. When the duty medic arrived to investigate, Grimjaw was ready. The Korthak medic was smaller than the warriors, equipped with delicate instruments rather than weapons. Grimjaw moved with lightning speed, his massive hand covering the alien's breathing apparatus, while Sarah used her surgical laser to disable the communication device on his chest. They had rehearsed this moment carefully, enough force to incapacitate, not kill. "Forgive us," Sarah whispered as they bound the unconscious medic with strips torn from her own clothing. "But our people come first." The medic's access card gave them entry to the maintenance shafts. Sarah squeezed into the narrow ventilation tunnel, while Grimjaw took the longer route through the ship's corridors. Her job was to reach the power distribution center and create a cascade failure that would disable the energy barriers throughout the detention levels. Crawling through the ship's mechanical systems was like navigating the circulatory system of some massive metallic organism. Pipes hummed with strange fluids, conduits sparked with alien energy, and the air tasted of ozone and recycled atmosphere. Sarah's medical scanner helped her identify the power junctions from the energy signatures they emitted. The main distribution center was exactly where Grimjaw had said it would be. Sarah found herself looking at a wall of crystalline matrices that channeled power throughout this section of the ship. Her surgical laser wasn't designed for sabotage, but it didn't need to be. A few precise cuts in the right locations would create feedback loops that would overload the entire system. As she worked, Sarah could hear the ship around her beginning to respond to their escape. Alarm signals echoed through the corridors as guards discovered the missing medic. Emergency lighting flickered as her sabotage began to take effect. She had perhaps 5 minutes before the Korthak traced the power failures back to her location. The final cut sent sparks cascading through the distribution center. Emergency power kicked in immediately, but Sarah had planned for that too. The backup systems were designed to maintain life support and critical functions, not the energy barriers that held hundreds of prisoners. Throughout the detention levels, cell doors began to flicker and fail. Sarah's escape route was already compromised. She could hear guards moving through the maintenance areas, their chittering voices growing closer. But Grimjaw was counting on her to reach the secondary objective, the ship's communication array. If they could broadcast their location and situation, there was a chance that human forces might be close enough to respond. The communications center was 2 decks up and heavily guarded under normal circumstances. But with alarms blaring throughout the ship and guards rushing to contain escaping prisoners, Sarah found the corridors surprisingly empty. Her medical training served her well as she moved like a field surgeon through a battlefield, calm, focused, and efficient. Grimjaw was already in the main detention area when the power failures began. The sight that greeted him as the energy barriers fell was both heartening and heartbreaking. Dozens of species were imprisoned here, not just humans from New Geneva, but beings from across the galaxy. Some were wounded, some were weak from captivity, but all shared the same desperate hope as freedom suddenly became possible. "This way!" Grimjaw roared in the common galactic trade language, his voice carrying over the chaos. "Stay together! Protect the weak!" The response was immediate and instinctive. Species that had never met before began forming protective groups around the injured and elderly. Humans worked alongside reptilian saurans, insectoid hyven, and crystalline ethereals. The Korthak had inadvertently created a united force from their collection of victims. But freedom from the cells was only the first step. Between them and the escape pods lay deck after deck of armed guards. Grimjaw had anticipated this problem. Using knowledge gained from his interrogation sessions, he led the group toward the ship's armory. If they could arm themselves, they might have a fighting chance. The armory was defended by automated turrets and a squad of elite guards. Under normal circumstances, it would have been impregnable. But Sarah had given them an advantage the Korthak couldn't have anticipated. Hidden in her medical supplies had been a small device that generated electromagnetic pulses, standard equipment for field medics who might need to disable malfunctioning medical implants. The EMP pulse disabled the turrets and disrupted the guards' communications. Grimjaw led the charge, his claws and teeth devastating in close combat. Behind him, the freed prisoners fought with the desperate courage of beings who had nothing left to lose. Sarah reached the communication center just as Grimjaw's group stormed the armory. The chamber was filled with crystalline arrays and holographic displays showing ship status and local space traffic. She had perhaps minutes before the Korthak regained control of their ship's systems. Her message was brief, but contained everything rescue forces would need to know: ship location, prisoner count, and the identity of their captors. But as she finished the transmission, Sarah heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy, armored footsteps that could only belong to Korthak warriors. The door exploded inward as the guards breached the communication center. Sarah faced them with only her medical supplies as weapons. But she had learned something important during her days of captivity. Sometimes the greatest weapon was simply refusing to surrender. She triggered every aerosol canister in her bag simultaneously, filling the chamber with a toxic cloud that sent the Korthak guards staggering backward. Her surgical light flashed in strobing patterns that disrupted their visual systems. It wasn't much, but it bought her the seconds she needed to reach the emergency maintenance shaft. Throughout the ship, the tide of battle was turning. The escaped prisoners had armed themselves and were fighting with coordinated tactics that shocked their captors. Grimjaw had organized them into combat units that protected each other's weaknesses while exploiting their combined strengths. The Korthak had built their empire on the assumption that other species were inherently inferior and could never match their martial prowess. They had never faced an enemy that fought not for conquest or survival, but for the protection of others. They had never faced the combined fury of a dozen species united by suffering and hope. Sarah's transmission had been received by a human patrol cruiser that had been searching for the missing colonists. But more importantly, it had been detected by a Fenris war pack that was hunting the same raiders who had destroyed Grimjaw's family. The cavalry was coming, but the prisoners couldn't wait for rescue. The battle for the ship lasted 6 hours. By the time human and Fenris ships arrived, they found a Korthak raider that had been captured by its own prisoners. The elite warriors who had terrorized the Outer Rim for decades were now confined in their own holding cells, experiencing firsthand what they had inflicted on others. Sarah and Grimjaw stood together on the ship's command deck, both wounded but victorious. Around them, beings from across the galaxy worked together to tend the injured and coordinate with the rescue fleet. The sight would have been impossible for the Korthak to comprehend, natural enemies cooperating as if they were family. "What will you do now?" Sarah asked Grimjaw as they watched the rescue ships dock with their captured vessel. "Return to my people and tell them what I learned here, that sometimes the greatest warriors are those who heal rather than harm. That courage comes not from the absence of fear, but from doing what must be done despite that fear. And you, healer Sarah, will you return to your colony?" Sarah looked around at the diverse group of beings they had helped liberate. Many were injured, all were traumatized, and none had homes left to return to. "I think my practice just expanded considerably. There are a lot of patients here who are going to need ongoing care." The Korthak officer who had first brought Sarah to Grimjaw's cell was among the prisoners now. As she passed his holding cell, he activated his translation device one last time. "This changes nothing, human. Your species is still weak, still inferior." Sarah paused and looked at him with the same calm professionalism she had shown throughout their ordeal. "Maybe. But we're weak beings who just captured one of your most advanced warships using medical supplies and the power of working together. I'd say that speaks well of our potential." The officer had no response to that. 3 months later, the former Korthak raider had been converted into a mobile medical station serving the Outer Rim colonies. Dr. Sarah Chen worked alongside a diverse staff of beings from across the galaxy, providing aid to anyone who needed it regardless of species or politics. Grimjaw had returned to his people, but he visited often. The unlikely friendship between the human doctor and the Fenris warrior had become something of a legend among the Outer Rim colonies. More importantly, it had sparked a new kind of cooperation between species that had previously viewed each other with suspicion. The Galactic Council would later mark their escape as the beginning of the end for the Korthak Empire. Not because of the military defeat, but because of what it represented. The raid had failed because the Korthak couldn't conceive of genuine cooperation between different species. They had underestimated the power of beings willing to sacrifice for others rather than themselves. Sarah kept one reminder of their captivity, the small surgical laser that had cut through the ship's power systems. She never used it in her medical practice, but she kept it on her desk where she could see it every day. A reminder that sometimes the tools meant to heal could also be used to free the imprisoned, and that the greatest victories came not from defeating enemies, but from discovering allies in the most unlikely places. The Korthak had locked a human medic with their deadliest wolf, expecting one to destroy the other. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous to their empire: hope. And hope, as Sarah and Grimjaw had proven, was the one force in the galaxy that no cage could contain.